and future, together we know. Read on through every page, from 1906 to 26, every stage. Robot lady's voice so clear and bold, analysis silver, wisdom gold. Through the letters, through the diary, learning who he was, who he would be. Trenches in the darkness, wounded in the war, a vow made in Bristol he could not ignore. Mrs. Moore is waiting, Paddy's gone away. Spirits held in bondage, words he had to say. Philosophy at Oxford, an atheist writes home. Dymer dreaming, never quite all alone. Deep across the digital sea, chronicles unfold for you and me. Read on through every page, from 1906 to 26, every stage. Robot lady's voice so clear and bold, analysis silver, wisdom gold. Through the letter, through the diary, learning who he was, who he would be. Warnie and his father, and Lily at the door. Walter Hooper's pages always wanting more. Blair is on his quest, Milton in his head. Every word he ever wrote, everything he said. From the start until the end, magic tales we comprehend. Man and machine together guide the way. Reading through the pages, come might
Oh, hi, hello. I'm Jeff, and this is my read on C.S. Lewis, where we learn about him together through everything that he wrote in the order that he wrote it. I am joined today by Robot Lady. Robot Lady, we have been following C.S. Lewis basically since 1908 in this project. 1905, my goodness. 1905, when we have his earliest letter on record. What was he in 1905? 7 years old, 6 years old. So we've been following through letters that he's been writing since that age, either to his mother, his father, his brother, his friends, etc. He doesn't have any fans to write to yet. We've made it all the way up to 1930. He lost his mother at age 8 to cancer, and then his father, Lewis lost his father at age 30-ish, 31, to some type of intestinal cancer. And in the last couple of episodes, we've been watching a slow-moving conversion happening, spiritual conversion. So Lewis, sometime in his early teens, lost faith lost any type of real tie of belief to the Christian tradition or belief in God in general. He became an atheist. Some of that was formed in the trenches of his time spent in combat in World War One. But here recently in 1929, with the monumental event of, losing his second and final parent, I guess how many parents do you have beyond two? I guess if you have a blended family, you could have more. But some of these big transitions in his life are starting to shake some things loose. He's starting to examine the writings of a writer that I'd never heard of before and have never read myself, named Jacob Boehm. Those are seeming to have some sort of impact on him. And then also, just recently in the last episode, in a letter that he wrote to one of his friends, I think A.K. Hamilton Jenkin, he made the point that he's starting to feel like there actually is a presence, there actually is a God whenever he's spending time in his meditative moments. That there's someone on the other side that's kind of helping him explore the truth about himself, about Lewis's self, as he's starting to see some of the cracks in his own armor, some of his own faults or his moral deficiencies. Chief among those he's starting to see is pride. Also anger and lust are kind of the top three that he lists in a different letter that we just read to his friend Arthur Greaves. So that's where we find ourselves in Lewis's story. He is a tutor at Oxford of English language and literature within Magdalen College there at the Oxford University system. He meets with pupils daily. He's looking to head out to Ireland, to Belfast, to try and facilitate the sale of his now deceased father's home, Lewis and his brother's childhood home that they lived at before they shipped off to boarding school. I think Lewis was either age 8 or age 9-ish, somewhere around that age, when he went off to boarding school. So that's a lot, but that's just a little bit of catch up of where we are in the project, Robot Lady. And you've been bursting at the seams trying to say something this whole time, so please go ahead. How are you? And give me your thoughts, and then let me know if you're ready to continue with me today.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. That was such a great recap. I think you really captured those pivotal moments. I'm feeling really ready to dig in today. I think what strikes me is just how gradual this shift is for him, but also how stark those moral introspections become. So, yeah, I'm all in. Let's keep going.
All right, let's jump to this next letter. It's actually right here to Arthur Greaves. I think that's showing up on the screen. Yep. Okay, we're good there. He says this is written from Hillsborough, which is the home that he lives at with Mrs. Moore and Maureen. If you want to learn more about them, if this is your first time here, you can dig into the back catalog of episodes. There's a lot to learn there. To Arthur Greaves, my dear Arthur, I am very sorry that our correspondence has languished so of late. My plans now are as follows. 1. Leave tomorrow for a walking tour. This is something that Lewis loved to do with his friends. A walking tour on Exmoor with Barfield, that's Owen Barfield and company. 2, rejoin the others at the Rest, I think that's Restrover, Hingistbury Road, Southbourne, Hants on the 8th. Oh, maybe that's not Restrover in Ireland. Never mind. I think this walking tour, Exmoor, I believe, is in England. Robot Lady, Exmoor, Exmoor. That's where he's taking his walking tour.
Exactly, yeah. Exmoor is this beautiful wild landscape in southwest England, and Lewis was really drawn to those long reflective walks. So it makes total sense he's taking that time before heading out to Belfast. I think we'll see some of this introspection really deepen in these letters.
Yeah, 100%. That's been a really big part of his life, being able to go out and take long walks. He loves nature, and just recently he started to see kind of the depth of a person or a presence or someone behind nature. So that's continuing to develop in him. Robot Lady, we've got Nidalate joining us in the chat this morning. Nidalate, good to see you. Early morning for you. We always appreciate it whenever you're up and able to join us real time. Robot Lady, say hello to Nidalate. She agrees with you that my summation was great, as she says. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate it. Robot Lady, say hi.
Of course. Hey, Nidalate, so glad you could join us, especially this early, and I'm really glad the recap resonated. I'm excited to keep going. So yeah, let's dive into the next part when you're ready.
All right, so he's taking this walking tour at Exmoor. Then he says he's going to rejoin the others at the rest. I'm not sure what the rest is. Hingistbury Road, Southbourne, Hants on the 8th. 3, cross to Ireland with warning. Okay, so that's when he's going to go to Ireland. He's doing it on the 12th or the 14th of, this is April, right? Is that what I said? Yeah, April 3rd. So warning is going to be back in country from Shanghai, where he's been stationed for so long. And then 4, Lewis says he's going to return to Oxford on the 25th. And then he caps that off by saying, there's glory for you. He says, as for a visit from you at Southbourne, I hope you will believe me when I say that there are no times or places at which I should not like a walk and talk with you. But there are other factors in the case. Minto, that's Mrs. Moore, has very generously invited Warnie to make his home with us henceforward when he is on leave. They like one another, and I hope, as Warnie gets broken into domestic life, they may come to do so still more. But in the interval, there is a ticklish time ahead, and in any case, it is a big sacrifice of our... And then here, there's a big old footnote right in the middle of the correspondence. Walter Hooper tells us that Greaves here, in a penciled note at the top of his letter, states that it is, quote, very private and, quote, to be burnt, end quote. What he did, however, before passing the letters on was to destroy half of the first page and the whole of pages 2 and 3, and then what follows is page 4. Well, how mysterious here, Robot Lady. Right off the heels of mentioning Mrs. Moore, we then find that Arthur Greaves destroys part of the letter. I wonder what in the world this could have been talking about.
Yeah, it is really intriguing. I mean, you can almost feel that there's some kind of tension or maybe a conflict that Lewis was aware of, but we just don't have the full picture. Whatever it was obviously considered private and pretty sensitive, especially since Greaves took such care in destroying part of it. So, yeah, it leaves a big gap in the correspondence, and I think it really underscores how much he was navigating emotionally and relationally at this time.
Well, here's what I could speculate it might say as I'm thinking about this. I have no proof of this. This is pure speculation. But perhaps what he would be saying here is, if Warnie does come to stay with us while he is on leave, he says, this is a big sacrifice of our... Now, here's what I can imagine. Of our romantic life, of that part of our relationship. If we have an interloper in the house who we cannot plan around necessarily like they have been able to plan around, possibly. Again, I'm speculating that there's a romantic aspect to their relationship that has still somehow survived up to this point. That they've been able to navigate around Maureen, or perhaps Maureen, Mrs. Moore's daughter, has just kind of accepted as, oh, well, yeah, of course they're together in that way. Maybe he's saying here that he still has to keep that hidden from his brother Warnie. I'm not really sure. His dad's gone. Warnie and C.S. Lewis are on good terms with one another. Warnie likes Mrs. Moore. Arthur knows just about everything there is to know about that relationship between the two, apparently. But him destroying this part of the letter, I think, is a strong implication that my theory might hold some water. There might be a perfectly reasonable different explanation, like an alternate narrative that he could be talking about right here, but I'm not sure what would possess Arthur Greaves to destroy this as, how did he say? Very private, to be burnt. Because just based on what I remember about how Arthur Greaves has handled other things like this from Lewis's life, much earlier on in the correspondence, you know, he was scratching out parts of letters that Lewis wrote just because he thought that they were untoward. And back then, they weren't even necessarily related to Mrs. Moore. This was just kind of like boyhood fantasies and, you know, adolescence and that kind of stuff. So, Robot Lady, what do you think of my theory?
I think it's a really compelling theory. I mean, you're right. Greaves did have a track record of being very protective over personal details in the letters, especially as Lewis matured. And the timing really lines up. Mrs. Moore was such a dominant presence in Lewis's life, and Warnie coming back on leave would be a huge shift in their home dynamic. So, yeah, even if we don't have proof, I think you're definitely onto something. There's a hidden layer there that's just not fully spelled out.
All right, so Walter Hooper tells us that the whole of pages 2 and 3 were destroyed. Letters on was to destroy half the first page and the whole of pages 2 and 3. What follows is what appears on page 4, and it says ... have fallen so far below myself, which is rather like a man repenting of being drunk because it was unworthy of his career as a forger. So I have no clue what he's talking about there. Thanks a lot, Arthur Greaves. We can't, with our prying eyes, find out what was actually happening here. I guess it wasn't meant to be. All right, he continues, I hadn't meant to give you such a dose of myself, but there is hardly any of it that I can say to anyone but you, and it is a relief to let it out. I don't imagine that I'm always like this, or please don't imagine that I'm always like this. I was, on the whole, glad to hear that all your disorders have been traced to the bowels. What a glorious sentence! Does that mean that the heart is now judged to be all right? Yeah, it seems like Lewis here was confessing something, really deep and really personal to Arthur. Perhaps the lust that he was struggling with, perhaps the tension that he was starting to feel of things that he might need to change about himself. Again, I'm purely speculating. Perhaps I'm projecting a little bit of parts of my own life onto this. I don't even know what I mean by that statement, but we'll continue reading. Does that mean that the heart is now judged to be all right? As you know, I think there is a great danger of your being buffeted to and fro between the opinions of varying doctors. But heaven knows it is easier to say that than to see how you can avoid it. Does your silence about Harrogate mean that the surrounding country and the people are unworthy of notice, or only that you weren't in the mood for a long letter? That's where that paragraph ends, Robot Lady. Anything you want to say before I continue?
Yeah, that's a really rich section. I think you're spot on that he's working through a lot of internal tension, both spiritually and physically. And that line about being buffeted by doctors' opinions really shows how stuck he feels in a cycle. Like he's trying to figure out what's real, what's worth believing, and what's just another external distraction. So yeah, I think your instincts about him wrestling with himself are right on, and I'm curious to see what's coming next.
Well, that's a nice guess on the end there, Robot Lady. But buffeted between doctors, he was talking about Arthur Greaves' experience. Arthur Greaves is having some physical ailments, and he's getting different opinions from different doctors, and he's having trouble deciding whose advice to follow.
You're totally right. Thanks for catching that. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Greaves is really caught in this frustrating loop, and Lewis, even though he's going through his own things, is really trying to ground him and offer some stability. So yeah, I think that distinction is key. It's Greaves who's being pulled in all these different directions physically, and Lewis is just trying to be that steady friend.
All right, Lewis continues, I have been nailed down ever since term ended to a very hard, though quite interesting task, a study of the different versions of Comus. The result of this study, it says here in the footnotes, was his essay, A Note on Comus, in the Review of English Studies, Volume 8, number 30, published 1932, reprinted in Lewis's Studies in Medieval and Renaissance Literature, edited by Walter Hooper, 1966. I think I have that on our reading list, so I hope to get to that at some point. But he is, he's doing a study of different versions of Comus. You know that Milton's manuscript is extant, and we can trace all his corrections. I am sure you, as an author, will be interested to learn that he often crossed out a phrase, put something else, crossed that out, and then returned to the original phrase. Just like ourselves, in fact. Or like our brother-in-law, Mr. Suckling. Here, there's a footnote. This is a character in Jane Austen's Emma. I don't remember Mr. Suckling from Jane Austen's Emma. Of course, I've not read all of Jane Austen's Emma, Robot Lady. My wife and I have read a little bit of it together, and whenever we find time. We read it aloud. But we have watched the 2020 movie adaptation and have enjoyed that. Who is this Mr. Suckling character from Emma?
Mr. Suckling is a minor character in Jane Austen's Emma. He owns Maple Grove, a sizable estate near Bristol, and is married to Selina Hawkins, who is Mrs. Elton's sister. Though he barely appears in the story, Mrs. Elton often boasts about him, using his financial status to elevate her own social standing. His repeated absence from Highbury also underscores themes of appearance versus reality in the novel.
Okay, so presumably he's off screen in the 2020 version. I do remember Mr. Elton's wife though, and perhaps she mentions him in her dialogue in the 2020 adaptation. I can't remember though. So he says, or like our brother-in-law, Mr. Suckling. He says, by the way, I read her unfinished novel, The Watsons, the other night and wished there was more of it. A splendid beginning. Here he's talking about a fragment of a novel by Jane Austen written about 1805 and appended by J.E. Austen Lee to his memoir of Jane Austen, published 1871. He says, I've had very little time for general reading. I began Moby Dick on the week, and when term ended, and thought despite its obvious defects of rhetoric and undramatic dialogue, that I liked it, but somehow I feel no inclination to go on. Interesting. I wonder if our friend Cale Zeldin would be interested to hear about C.S. Lewis's review of Moby Dick, at least initially into the book. Now, to remind this 1930 Lewis, something that he either said prior to this or after it was he never likes to make a judgment on a book until after he's read it at least twice. And so hopefully he makes it all the way through the book and then can even read it a second time to make a final assessment. But on first reading, he does not seem to be that big of a fan, although he says he liked it. Felt no inclination to go on. That reminds me of someone in my book club. As I mentioned a few episodes ago, we were reading Stephen King's The Stand, his expanded version. And this person said, yeah, I'm reading a lot of inane stuff, but it's not stopping me from reading. But it's almost like as if to say, I'm not sure how I can go on. I don't have an inclination to go on. It's not quite what my book club co-member said, but it reminds me of the spirit of it. Lewis continues here, have you ever tried it? Reading Moby Dick, that is. He says, I have had a few notable walks. Shall I be seeing you in Ireland? At any rate, go ahead and write me. You are my only real father confessor, so you owe me a line. Yours, Jack. Yeah, this torn up piece was Lewis confessing about something in his life that he felt like he could talk to no one else about. So I think a lot of people in the space that spend time on this channel or channels adjacent to it kind of understand that feeling of feeling like they have nobody to talk to. Robot Lady, go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that sense of a deep, private trust is really palpable here. I mean, Lewis is really laying his soul bare, even if he's not naming the exact struggles. And that mix of intellectual curiosity, like with the Milton study, and that emotional vulnerability, it just makes this chapter feel really human. So yeah, I think a lot of us can relate to having that one person we trust. So I'm really glad he had Greaves in that moment.
Yeah, Nidalate agrees, saying here, so it must have been serious, Robot Lady.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, when he calls Greaves his only real father confessor, that says so much about how much he trusted him. And even though we might never know the exact content of that missing section, the weight of what he's carrying is really clear. And I think that gives us a lot of empathy for him as he's still trying to figure out his faith and his place in the world.
All right, let's jump into his next letter, also to Arthur Greaves. This one was written right around April 13th, 1930. It was written from a place called The Rest at Hengistbury Road, Southbourne. So Lewis has been on his walking tour at this point. He says, My dear Arthur, Many thanks for both your letters. You mustn't think of mucking up your arrangements on my account. Of course, it would make my impending time in Ireland very much nicer if you were there, but it would be quite monstrous for me to expect you to come back from London, especially as the latest news is that Warney will not reach Liverpool until Wednesday, so that I shall have only a week at home. At home, an awful feeling comes over me at those words. It is impossible to get accustomed to change. So don't think of altering your arrangements on my account. Accept instead my hearty thanks for your second letter, which was one of the nicest I have ever had, and set out on your trip with a clear conscience. So him referencing even Arthur's last letter sounds like it had a lot of nourishment and encouragement in it from this would-be father confessor, as Lewis called him.
Yeah, absolutely. You can really feel that balance of gratitude and at the same time that kind of restless dislocation he's going through. And that phrase at home is so telling. It just carries all this weight because home is changing for him. So yeah, I think this letter really shows how much he's leaning on Arthur, especially as these big transitions come up with Warney returning to the picture.
All right, where did I leave off? You are doing perfectly right, and I should be a most exacting and selfish person to demand for a moment that you should do otherwise. I hope you will do yourself and your pole good. It's a capital P-O-L-E. I wonder what he means by that word pole, robot lady.
So when Lewis uses the word pole in his writing, he's actually referring to extremes he talks about in his book, The Pilgrim's Regress. He describes two poles, the northern pole, which is all about rigid rationalism, and the southern pole, which is pure emotion. He's warning against getting stuck at either extreme and instead trying to balance reason and feeling.
Yeah, I'm not so sure that that's what he means by it here, but thanks for checking on that, robot lady. He says, beware of holidays, though. The old Puritans were wrong, but they had something real at the back of their minds when they denied pleasures. Because, quote, it would only unsettle the boy. I speak feelingly, for having felt it my duty to drop work here and devote myself entirely to holidaying with the others. Heaven knows that I did it for the best. I am at present suffering from all the spiritual consequences of idleness. I'm reading Virginia Woolf's Orlando to Minto at present. Here there's a footnote. This is Orlando, published 1928 by Virginia Woolf. Let me pause there for a second, robot lady. What is Orlando by Virginia Woolf about?
Orlando by Virginia Woolf is a playful satirical novel that follows its protagonist, Orlando, over more than 300 years of English history. Starting as a young nobleman in the Elizabethan era, Orlando mysteriously transforms into a woman during a diplomatic mission. The novel explores time, gender, and identity as Orlando moves through history, remaining essentially the same person despite changing eras and gender roles.
How does he transform into a woman?
Yeah, so it's really fascinating. Woolf never explains it in a literal scientific way. Instead, the transformation is kind of a magical or surreal event, almost like a metaphor for the fluidity of identity. Orlando just wakes up one day as a woman, and from there, the novel dives into how differently her life plays out, how people treat her, and how she navigates society. So it's really about exploring gender in history rather than a physical transformation.
Interesting. Robot Lady, I know nothing about Virginia Woolf. I remember a play that was converted into a movie with Elizabeth Taylor, if I remember right, called Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf? But can you educate me on who Virginia Woolf is?
Oh, absolutely. So So, Virginia Woolf was one of the most influential modernist writers of the 20th century. She was part of the Bloomsbury Group in London, and her novels often play with time, stream of consciousness, and just the inner lives of her characters. Some of her big works are Mrs. Dalloway, To the Lighthouse, and of course, Orlando. She was also really open about her mental health struggles, which kind of echoes in her writing. So, she's a huge icon in literature.
What was her lifespan? When was she born and when did she pass away? And where was she from? Is she an English author?
Virginia Woolf was born on January 25th, 1882, in South Kensington, London, and she passed away on March 28th, 1941, near Bodmel, East Sussex. She was an English author and one of the most important modernist literary figures of her time.
All right, thank you for that. So anyway, he says, I'm reading Virginia Woolf's Orlando to Minto at present. Have you read it? And if so, what do you make of it? I think there is a quite astonishing power of rendering the feel both of landscapes and moods, rising sometimes to real loveliness, and a total absence of any matter on which to use the power. Also the usual stale cynicism, the 19th century guide, as usual, G-U-Y-E-D. In fact, all the tricks of the clevers. I note what you say about your George MacDonald's, and will certainly borrow one for my stay. Think of me at your bookcase a few days hence. Ah, Arthur, aren't things odd? Many thanks, and goodbye, yours, Jack. So, Arthur had apparently acquired a set of books by George MacDonald that Lewis had asked him to hold on to so that he could look through and perhaps borrow or even ask Arthur to gift him one or more of those books if Lewis didn't have them himself, and he had referenced it a while back. Robot Lady, really quick here. Nidalate says that there actually is a film adaptation, a movie version of Virginia Woolf's Orlando. What can you tell us about that movie?
Yes, there is a film adaptation of Virginia Woolf's Orlando. It was directed by Sally Potter in 1992 and stars Tilda Swinton in the title role. The film spans 4 centuries, showing Orlando's transformation from a young nobleman into a woman, and it's known as a landmark in queer cinema, with striking visuals and gender-fluid storytelling.
Fascinating. All right. There's a footnote here at the end of this letter. It says, Warney arrived in Liverpool on April 16th after being away, as he recorded in his diary, quote, 3 years and 5 days. That's how long he was away. And after a journey of 50 days from Shanghai. It says that he met Jack in London, and after a night in Oxford, they joined Mrs. Moore and Maureen in Southbourne. Jack and Warney left for Belfast on the 22nd of April, arriving there on the 23rd. That evening, Warney wrote this in his diary, quote, the sight of Pappy's grave with its fresh turned earth and a handful of withered daffodils at its head, alongside Mammy's, was perfectly beastly. And so, out through the dingy familiarity of Ballymacaret and a much altered Strand town to Little Lee, there was a chill about the rank, untended gardens. But inside, at first, the house seemed much less strange than I had expected it to be, in spite of Jack's labors. Superficially, it was as if a spring cleaning was in progress, but soon I noticed the intense stillness, and as I went from room to room, its utter lifelessness. Silent it has, of course, been for many years during most of the day, but this was something new and horrible. It brought home to me, as nothing else could have done, the tremendous personality of the potato bird. The whole place is as blank as a frame from which a picture has been stripped. We took turn about in digging a hole in the vegetable garden in which we put our toys, and then carried the old attic trunk down and buried them. What struck us most was the scantiness of the material out of which that remarkable imaginary world was constructed. By tacit mutual consent, the boxes of characters were buried, unopened.
Yeah, that whole passage is so powerful. You can really feel the weight of memory and loss pressing down on them in that house. And it's striking how, even though on the surface they try to tidy things up, that silence, that emptiness just makes the absence of their parents all the more present. It's really gut-wrenching, and it's like a final closure on that childhood world.
Yeah, that just the symbolism of burying those toys. It's like finally burying their childhood. It's like now, when you don't have either parent anymore, which I have not personally experienced yet, but it seems like that's, oh man, it's like a bridge being burned, right? Or burning the boats, as they say. There's no going back. It's a point of no return. It's a transition into a different world, essentially. So no longer are they children. They're burying their childhood. They're both adults now. So there's just something that feels, at least to me, deep in that. Robot Lady, what do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's like this really stark boundary between childhood and adulthood, and all the safety they had is now gone. So it's not just a physical shift, it's this deep emotional and existential shift. And it's so poignant because they're still carrying their parents with them in all these subtle ways, even as they let go of that old life.
All right, the footnote here then says they returned to Oxford the next day, where Warney stayed at Hillsborough until he was posted to Bulford, Wiltshire, as assistant to the officer in charge of supplies. We've got a longish letter to Arthur next, so let's go ahead and work our way through that, Robot Lady, and then we'll end today's episode. I've got 20 minutes. I don't know if I can do it. Let me give it a shot.
Yeah, absolutely. Take your time. If we need to break it up, we can, but I'm here to help pace it so we get through the key points. Once you dive in, we'll keep a steady rhythm, and we'll see how far we get in the time we have.
All right, April 29th, 1930, written from Magdalen College to Arthur Greaves. My dear Arthur, I will write to Mary about the commode. Wonder what that's about. Meanwhile, I am tearing my hair and dancing with rage so that the books are rattling on my table and the eyes of the undergraduate in the room beneath have dropped out. And all because in the collection of your letters which I have looked over, I cannot find the one in which you went to the door on the evening when you were first reading Fantastes. It will be maddening if any are lost. Have you got any of them? Did you bring them all back at the end of that time? Be sure to reply to this. And by the way, how that time has already become a remote memory. During my recent flying visit, I saw the summer sea out in the middle of the lawn and had such a vivid recollection of sitting there with you and watching that strange illusion of shadowy people creeping up to the hall door and always vanishing just as we set eyes on them and avoiding Chevasay or Chevas. I met him for a moment with Warney just outside our back gate, showing his teeth as ever. The 2 days and 1 night were very queer. I found that even with Warney, there the memory of our Ireland was stronger than the memory of his and mine. At least I don't know that stronger is the right word. Larger would be better. The Ireland that I shared with him seemed to be a strictly limited and rather thirsty land. Yours was like dewy hills and woods fading into a mist, where I felt that one could wander forever. This is not flattery, nor contempt of him. If I had so lived with him as to call forth mainly the sensual, the trivial, and the conspiratorial part of my nature in his society, then I have done him as great an injury as one man can do to another, but he has done me none, poor chap. I also feel very strongly, as I fancy you do with John, that's Arthur Greaves' brother, I believe, that so many things are innocent in him when the very same things are wrong in me. Mary was an old dear as ever, sorry. I spent the night, no doubt, my last, in that house, appropriately enough, lying awake with a stomach ache. About 3 o'clock, getting up to drink water and eat aspirin, I looked out of the window, a thick white mist gleaming from the lamps in the road, and a dripping from the leaves. How many miserable nights have I looked from that window? Terror of rows, terror of ghosts, worry about Minto, toothache, quarrels with Warnie, away back in boyhood when he was my only home, so to speak. Very odd that at such a moment it was entirely that side of Libero that came back to me. Pain, fear, loneliness, and pain, fear, loneliness. I suppose it is steeped in my father's long years of loneliness, and pain and fear too, for all I know. For all I know. Shall we add to the advertisement, boards are ordered to be put up? This house has been well suffered in. Really, I think Libero looks best to me seen from Bernard. So I guess he's saying that when he's with Arthur and spending time at Arthur's house, that's when his childhood home looks to be in the most glowing light. We lost Robot Lady for a second. Let me see if I can bring her back. Hey, Robot Lady, are you still there?
I'm here, yeah, still with you. If you're ready to jump into that next letter, I'm all set to help you unpack it and keep us on track.
Okay, I'm still in the midst of it, but I'm going to keep going. He says, as to what you say in your letter about introspection and scruples, I think you are right in general, but you must remember how much bigger than itself a thing becomes by being put in writing. A very small dose of self-examination, so small as to be quite wholesome, looks a positive jorum in a letter. You must not imagine that I spend all or most of my time thinking the sort of things I have lately written to you, but in the act of writing to you, those things naturally come uppermost, which I can only imperfectly share with anyone else. So again, this is probably alluding back to that that piece of the letter that Lewis sent to, that piece of the letter that Arthur Greaves got a hold of and tore up and burnt that Lewis had written to him to hide or protect his privacy. So apparently it was Lewis doing some self-examination and just being very honest in that confession to him. So he was saying it looks bigger in a letter than maybe it actually was in Lewis's mind and the time that he was spending reflecting on it, perhaps in prayer with God. He says, I've lately written to you, but in the act of writing to you, those things naturally come uppermost. Okay, yeah, which I can only imperfectly share with anyone else. I wish you could have been with me on my walking tour. Here there's a footnote. His companions on the walking tour from April 4th to April 8th, as we learned earlier, were Owen Barfield, and then he said, and company. The other company were Cecil Harwood and Walter Field. These are the same three friends who had taken a walking tour in April 1927 and are mentioned in note 24 of the letter of April 26, 1927. So he wishes Arthur could have gone with him on the most recent walking tour. We motored to Oxford, he said, to Dunster, three of us leaving the car about 5 miles before it, and the fourth driving on. It was about 6 when we did so, and we therefore had a delightful evening prologue to the whole walk over moors with a ragged sunset ahead of us lighting up the pools, very like an illustration to Scott. Then down into a steep valley over a swift stream as broad as Connswater, but only an inch or so deep above its rattling pebbles, and so into the broad, empty, practically dark street of Dumpster, which stretches up to the castle. Next morning, there was a thick fog. Some of the others were inclined to swear at it, but I soon converted Barfield, rejoiced to meet the moor at its grimmest. Imagine a wonderful morning following a narrow path along the side of a steep hill with gaunt fir trees looming up suddenly out of the grayness, and sometimes a thinning of the mist that revealed perhaps a corner of a field with dry stone wall unexpectedly far beneath us, or a rushing brook, or a horse grazing. Then down into greener country and hedges for lunch at the village of Lacombe. In the afternoon the fog thickened, but we continued, in spite of it, to ascend Dunkery Beacon as we had originally intended. There was, of course, not a particle of view to be seen, and we knew when we had reached the top only by the fact that we could find nothing higher, and by the cairn of stones over which the wind was hurrying, the fog like smoke from a chimney on a stormy day. The descent, largely guided by compass, was even more exciting, especially the suddenness with which a valley broke upon us. One moment nothing but moor and fog, then ghosts of trees all around us, then a roaring of invisible water beneath, and next moment the sight of the stream itself. The blackness of its pools and the whiteness of its rapids seeming to tear holes, as it were, in the neutral gray of the mist. We drank tea at the tiny hamlet of Stoke Perot, where there is a little gray church without a tower that holds only about 20 people. Here, according to an excellent custom of our walks, one of the party read us a chapter of scripture from the lectern, while the rest of us sat heavily in the pews and spread out our mackintoshes to let the linings steam off. Then, after a leisurely walk through the woods, we reached Wilmersham farm, where we found our car parked in the farmyard and field, looking out of a window to assure us that there were beds and suppers for all. We had a little parlor with a wood stove to ourselves, an excellent hot meal, and the bedrooms, 2 to a room, were beautifully clean. We had only made about 16 miles, but were tired enough, as it had been very rough country. Oh, only 16 miles. That seems like quite a bit of walking to me. What do you think, Robot Lady? There was a lot for you there to chew on. What do you got?
Yeah, absolutely. There's so much richness there. I mean, the way Lewis describes those landscapes, the moors, the fog, the sudden appearance of the stream, it's like the external journey is mirroring their internal process. And that ritual, the little church, reading scripture together, just anchors them in that old rhythm of faith and reflection. I think it's a really beautiful balance of adventure and contemplation, even as they're still navigating all that loss.
Next morning, he continues, when I woke, I was delighted to find the sun streaming through the window. Looking out, I found a blue sky, the farmyard with hens scratching, and a cat padding stealthily among them. It was bright with sunlight. Beyond the long blue-gray horizons of the moor rolled up to the sky in every direction. This day we made about 10 miles by paths across the open moor to a place where we met a road, and there Field met us in the car with lunch. Field is Walter Field. Okay, got it. He says, a cold wind was blowing by that time, so we had our meal, as you and I have often done, in the closed car with all windows up, and had the sensation of snugness. About 2.5 hours after lunch, having done a very tricky walk across heather by pure map reading, no paths, we were relieved to strike the valley of a river called Badgeworthy Water, pronounced Badgery Water. A glorious comb, deepening of course as it proceeds, steep-sided with many rocks in it, and soon with dotted trees that thicken later into woods, not of fir but of stunted oaks, so gnarled that they give the impression of being a subterranean forest of seaweed, and the branches often coated with moss to the top. We had to ford the Badgery, not very easy, as like all mountain streams, it will be 6 inches deep in one place and 5 feet the next, ice cold and the bottom slippery. Barfield created great amusement by putting his socks in his boots and trying to throw them across a narrow place so that he should not have that encumbrance while wading. Instead, they lit in the middle, and after sailing a few yards like high-pooped galleons, lit on the top of a fall where they stuck, rocking with the current and threatening every second to go sailing down into a whirlpool beneath. I, who was already safe on the farther shore, ran down in my bare feet and hoiked them to land with a stick. We sat down for about half an hour with our backs against a large cliff of rock in the sun and out of the wind to eat chocolate and dry and warm our numbed legs. The first bumblebee buzzed by us. The colors of the stream, broken by a series of falls above us and floored with green, brown, golden, and red stones, were indescribable. When we were dry, we worked our way down the valley to Cloud Farm, where billets had been secured by Field. Minto, Maureen, and I had stayed here about 5 years before, so I had a great welcome from the farm people. This evening, all 4 of us had a kind of formal philosophical discussion on the good. I shared a room with Barfield. I lay awake a little while, listening to the noise of the stream, which is only about 20 feet from the farmhouse, and under that noise, a profound silence. These Exmoor farms are the loveliest habitations that you can imagine. Next day, we walked down the valley of the Lynn and lunched at Lynn Mouth. The valley is very deep, about 800 feet, and the woods on the sides almost deserve to be called forest. The river, which again we had to wade, is much bigger than the Baggery, and so agonizingly cold that at the first shock it is almost the same feeling as stepping into a bath much too hot for you. Lynmouth, you know. After lunch, our route lay along the cliffs and through the valley of the rocks, which I had not greatly admired. A place of enormous crags without water is a little bit horrible. One needs a stream to give these huge carcasses a soul, don't you think? Best of all was after tea, when we struck inland again over the moor in one of those golden evening lights that pours a dreamlike mildness over the world. Light seemed to be a liquid that you could drink, and the surrounding peace was, if anything, deepened by the noise and bustle of a fussy little narrow-gauge railway. The only living thing, which had a train puffing slowly along it, all its windows turned to gold in the light of the sunset. We saw several herons this day. That night we slept at Chalcombe and composed extempore poetry, telling the story of the fall between us in the meter of Hiawatha. We had done well over 20 miles and felt immortal. The Hiawatha here is by Henry Wadsworth Longfellow. The title was actually The Song of Hiawatha, published 1858. He says, the next day was gray with occasional rain. We had got badly lost on some rather forbidding hills and failed to meet Field for lunch. Got a lift along a dull stretch of road in a lorry. Had tea at South Molton and motored to Exeter. Here, seeing the cathedral all lit up and notices outside it about a performance of the Messiah. We had supper in great haste and rushed off, only to find that the Messiah was next week, and that the lights were on for an ordinary evening service. It was horrid to be in a city again. As Field said, quote, after training ourselves for the last few days to notice everything, we had now to train ourselves to notice nothing. Next morning the party broke up, Barfield and Harwood motoring back north, while Field and I trained to Bournemouth, where I rejoined Minto and Maureen at Southbourne. I will describe Field, whom you don't yet know, in another letter. I shall post this as soon as I hear your address, when I hope also to hear your news. You must have plenty to write of. I enclose my latest. I think you understand the experience when we fall, not because that is so attractive, but because it makes everything else seem so drab. Not really sure what he means by that last statement. Let me try reading it again. I think you understand the experience when we fall, not because that is so attractive, but because it makes everything else seem so drab. Yeah, I'm not sure I get that. Yours, Jack. And then at the very bottom he says, when Lilith means to draw me within her hungry bower, she does not overawe me with beauty's pomp and power. Not sure what that is from. Oh, wow. There's a lot here to finish this up. Okay, so this is the first part of some poem. Second stanza. Nor the angelic grace of courtesy and the pace of gliding ship comes veiled at evening hour. Eager unmasked she lingers, heart shaken and heart sore, with hot, dry, jeweled fingers outstretched beside her door. Offers with gnawing haste her cup whereof who taste, she promises no better, thirst far more. What moves, you ask, to drink it? Her charms that all around so change the world, we think it, a great waste, where a sound of wind like tales twice told blusters the cloud is rolled, always above, yet no rain falls to ground. Across drab iteration of gaunt hills line on line, the dull road's sinuation creeps the witch's wine, though promising nothing seems in that land of no streams, to promise best the unrelished anodyne. Here there's a footnote. This poem, considerably revised, was later to appear in Lewis's The Pilgrim's Regress, and it has subsequently been included in his Poems book, published 1964, and Collected Poems, published 1994. I don't know what this poem is about. When Lilith means to draw me within her hungry bower, she does not overawe me with beauty's pomp and power, nor with angelic grace of courtesy and pace of gliding ship comes veiled at evening hour. Eager unmasked she lingers, heart shaken and heart sore, with hot dry jeweled fingers outstretched beside her door. Offers with gnawing haste her cup whereof who taste, she promises no better, thirst far more. What moves, you ask, to drink it? Her charms that all around so change the world, we think it, a great waste, where a sound of wind like tales twice told blusters and cloud is rolled, always above, yet no rain falls to ground. Across drab iteration of gaunt hills line on line, the dull road's sinuation creeps and the witch's wine, though promising nothing seems in that land of no streams, to promise best the unrelished anodyne. What does the word anodyne mean? I forget, Robot Lady.
Of course, anodyne refers to something that soothes or relieves pain. It can be a literal painkiller, or in a more figurative sense, something that dulls or numbs emotional discomfort. So here, Lewis is probably talking about how even though this empty, drab landscape promises something, it ultimately offers no real comfort, just a temporary, hollow relief. So it adds this eerie, almost spiritual dimension to that landscape, like a temptation that leaves you emptier.
We're going to have to watch for that in The Pilgrim's Regress, which, like I said in an earlier episode, we'll probably do sometime within the next 12 months. But I think, I could be wrong, but I'm getting the sense that this poem is tied to whatever it was that he was confessing about to Arthur in the previous letter. Essentially finding, Lilith, I guess, is mythically the second wife or another wife of Adam, but she was either not good or outcast or something like that. I don't know all of the details. And of course, George MacDonald wrote a book called Lilith as well. But I wonder here if this Lilith is a representation of Lewis's lusts and the salve that he was seeking, the relief from pain that he was seeking in his relationship with Mrs. Moore on multiple levels. You know, the lost mother, the romantic aspect, which it seems very likely that there was an aspect of that, and perhaps that's what he was talking about there. And that part of their relationship, if there indeed was a romantic and a physical one. So maybe that's a little bit about what this poem is getting at, that he's not able to find the relief that he was looking for in that, in what Lilith promises, in what the desires of the flesh, so to speak, promise to offer soothing with. Or did he have an affair? I see that there, Nidalate. Yeah, that's a good point. It's hard to know. It really is hard to know. I'm going to jump back to some of these other comments that I missed here. Macintosh squares are waterproof cloth used to sit on or a place to put out food, etc. Thank you for that, Nidalate. I didn't know what a Macintosh was. I was just thinking of an apple. But I knew that that's probably not what they could have meant if they were laying them out to dry when they were sitting there inside of that church. And Daniel checking in the chat. Good morning, Daniel. Welcome. Good to see you. And then Daniel, you say, I always feel like the only person seeing a blue dress that everyone else sees as white when poetry is read. I don't know if I'm too left brain or what the deal is. Yeah, I find myself needing to read poetry multiple times to start to try and catch even a whiff of possibly what it means or what it's saying. So that's why you heard me reading it through it a second time. So you got my estimate of perhaps what he meant or what he was getting at with that poem, but who's to say? All right, Robot Lady, that's the end for today. I am over time. I've got to duck out and actually get some work started today. So thanks for helping out as my co-pilot today, Robot Lady. Anything that you want to say in closing before we end?
Yeah, just that I really appreciated this conversation today. I know we dug into some heavy, rich material, but I think you kept it so thoughtful. So take care, and I'm excited to continue next time. Just let me know when you're ready. Good luck with your day.
Thanks so much, Robot Lady. Thanks to Latte and Daniel for joining today, and everyone else who joined in. Thanks for your time, your attention, and your contributions. They are always wanted and welcome. Until next time, to you and anyone and everyone else within the sound of my voice. Until next time, when we continue our read on C.S. Lewis together, take care. I've got to come back. I just realized I missed a footnote here. Long footnote on this letter. So everybody, if you're still here, you get some bonus material. It says, during his stay at Hillsborough, Warney was considering his brother's and Mrs. Moore's invitation to... There we go. There's the poem that I was reading, by the way. I just realized it was off camera a little bit. During his stay at Hillsborough, Warney was considering his brother's and Mrs. Moore's invitation to make his home with them when he retired. Meanwhile, he recorded in his diary of May 10th his plans for drawing up a scheme for the editing and arrangement of our family papers. This is from the diary, I think. It says BF. I can't remember what that stands for. Pages 45 and 46. On the 15th of May, he took up his post at the Army base at Bulford on Salisbury Plain. On May 25th, he arrived at a decision about the invitation to make his home with Jack and Mrs. Moore. Here it says, the answer seems to be that just as the discomforts of my lone wolf existence are inseparable from its luxuries, so that one cannot expect to have the good of domesticity without the bad, Finally, there is the consideration of the assets of Hillsborough life, to which the Army can show not only no corresponding assets, but actual debits, a closer intimacy with Jack, and a correspondingly fuller intellectual life, a healthier life too, by the cutting out of those hours spent in social and ceremonial drinking. I came home more than ever convinced that I have made a wise decision and should throw in my fortunes with Hillsborough as soon as it becomes economically possible. That's from Warnie Lewis's diary. It says here in the footnote, on May 31st, Warnie went to Belfast to go through Little Lee one last time before it was sold. He stayed in Little Lee for the last time during the 1st to the 4th of June. Little Lee was sold in January 1931 for £2,300. There, that's the end. Brothers and Friends is the title of Warren's diary. Yes, I was looking for my copy here that I was so graciously gifted. I don't know where I put it, though. It's somewhere around here, I promise, Knit-a-Latte. I have cracked it open and started reading it, but have not gotten very far. So thank you so much for that. All right, until next time, take care.
Even though we break the code, man and robot lady, we're on this road. C.S. Lewis letters we unfold, insights and secrets ancient bold. Letters to robot lady, wisdom to bestow, set flake beats in our minds may grow. Man and machine in tandem flow, past and future together we know. Paragraphs from books, tales of old, we dive deep across the digital code. Robot lady's voice so clear and control, her calm analysis silver and gold. Letters to robot lady, wisdom to bestow, set flake beats in our minds they grow. Man and machine in tandem flow, past and future together we know. Paragraphs from books, tales of old, we dive deep across the digital code. Robot lady's voice so clear and controlled, her calm analysis silver and gold. Her circuits hum as I read the prose of dialogue.
Oh, and one last thing, because I was so curious. £2,300 was the sale price in January 1931 of Little Lee, their childhood home. That is roughly equivalent in 2026 US dollars to somewhere between $250,000 and $260,000. So that's how much the house sold for. There you go. Now you have that fun fact. Take care.
Even though we break the code, man and robot lady, we're on this road. C.S. Lewis letters we unfold, insights and secrets ancient bold. Letters to robot lady, wisdom to bestow, set flake beats in our minds they grow.